So we're going to keep it moving here. And I'm going to bring up to the stage an author. She wrote this really great book that I have here with me. It's called Glitter and Concrete. You can actually buy it here as well after the show. I'm going to bring her up to the show. Are you here, Elyssa? All right, guys, please welcome to the stage Elyssa Maxx Goodman. All right, so I got my little question. Welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me. Hi, everyone.
Of course. Thank you for coming. Thank you for putting your trust in me. It's a weird ask. You guys have no idea how many times I've asked professors and stuff to do this, and they're like, stop emailing me. What is this? So anyways, there's your picture. Look at that. All right, very cool.
Oh, my God.
Pretty cool. That's me.
That's me.
That's me, and that's me right there, a little bookworm. All right.
More leopard. Leopard for everyone.
All leopard, all the time.
The brand is strong.
So here we go. So I'm going to ask you some questions. So she wrote the book Glitter and Concrete, A Cultural History of Drag in New York City. Awesome book. Really recommend it. It's a very, I guess, mysterious culture to a lot of people, but this sheds a light, gives the history. It's really great, by the way.
Thank you.
No problem. And that's the end of the interview. Thank you for coming. No, but here's the deal. So I'm going to ask you some questions. This ain't your grandma's interview show, all right? These are going to be hard-hitting questions, so brace yourself. All right, here we go. How are you?
I'm okay. Nailed it. Yes.
I'll accept it. Acceptable. No, but all right, here we go. For real, let's get started here. So what is one thing you wish more people knew about drag?
I think the thing that I wish more people knew about drag was that it's an art form with thousands of years of history. And I think, to say the very least, there would be a lot that's different in, at the very least, our current cultural climate if people knew that and understood that. I think in the same way that people study theater history or music history or photography history, drag history is also an essential part of our understanding of the arts.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, from your book, it's interesting how much drag has influenced like pop culture that we all consume. I mean, and not just today's, but in the 80s, the 70s. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because, you know, drag has obviously can be controversial and there's a lot of blowback and all this, yet people willingly and happily consume the culture that is influenced by it. I mean, you think of like hair metal bands, think of like Led Zeppelin and the New York Dolls, like all these, and even today, you got
professional wrestling.
Professional wrestling, huh? Any 16-year-old boys out there? Huh? But yeah, it's pretty incredible, and you did a good job of tracking that. So I guess what drew you to drag and to write about it?
I saw drag for the first time at 7 years old, and I saw the film Tu Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, if anyone has seen that. To that point, my mother had shown me movie musicals from the 1950s, and I loved the costumes. I loved, these swirling colors and elegance and glamour. And then I saw this movie that was happening at the time now, and that was it. Those were my Disney princesses.
Nice.
And it changed my life.
Nice.
I wouldn't be here without it. Yeah.
Look at that. You guys are looking at Ron DeSantis' nightmare right here.
Yes.
This is what happens.
A girl can dream.
A girl can dream. That's right.
I'm from South Florida, too.
Are you really? What part?
Fort Lauderdale.
Okay, nice.
Yep.
I'm from Tampa.
Hey.
Look at that.
Right.
That's right. Pretty cool. We escaped. Look at us, refugees. All right. Well, that's great. So one of the things that I thought was super interesting about the book is the tie that you made with activism and drag. And I think that's, once I read the book, I'm like, holy crap, yeah, it's so obvious. I mean, because drag itself, just dressing in drag is a political statement already.
Absolutely.
So it naturally, follows that you would be a, politically active or whatever. But I would like to hear your thoughts a little more on that connection.
Well, I mean, what's funny about that is that that's not a connection that I made. That's just the way that people lived, and I reported the facts.
Right.
And I think that when you are, and like you said, when you are living in a way that has been deemed incorrect by someone else, to do that in itself is a political act. And especially with drag, you are taking up space in a very bold, visible way. So it's not just in the drag; it's in the presentation of it, and it becomes an embodiment of this representation. And you move through the world and you say, "This is who I am." And I am taking up space, and I don't care what you have to say about it. And that moves into the quest for queer civil rights very actively. I mean, the people who started the Stonewall Uprising were transgender women of color and drag queens.
Yeah, yeah, and also I think what you said in the book as well, I thought was interesting. Not only are you taking up space and the flash and all the, I guess, the flamboyance and all that, it also is turning on their head the most basic assumptions about society,
Oh,
just by
absolutely.
dressing up. You're basically turning, the binary on its head, you're turning everything on its head, and I guess that's also probably why people react the way they do as well, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, people don't like to have their
Right.
their assumptions about gender challenged,
Right.
as we're now seeing very clearly and have seen throughout, throughout history. And the backlash that we're facing to drag right now is, of course, not unprecedented. Drag has faced backlash in every decade in its thousands of years of history. And most art forms get a break after a while. Like photography. There wasn't a photography department at the Museum of Modern Art until 1940, and that was, 60 years after the development of photography. So, and early on, movies were considered so sinful, right? And then now, it's everyone tunes into the Oscars and things like that. So other art forms have gotten a break after a while, and drag is really not something that has seen that in the same way, even though now at this point, we are now, I would say, arguably the most culturally comfortable we've been with it, maybe in its modern history. And then the other part about it, too, about confronting gender, is that, it does do these things that you said. It it takes these ideas that, actually, there's a really interesting Smithsonian article about how the blue for boys, pink for girls was a marketing ploy. It takes all of these assumptions that have been given to gender, and it just says, well, actually, I'm going to do whatever I want and present and perform and live and take up space in this body however I see fit. And that's power, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, and I mean, and God forbid you do that and then come across confident, happy, and actually enjoying what you're doing.
And
Once
affect
again.
other people,
And affect other people,
to do and be and
Yeah.
feel those things as well. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a great quote in your book where you said, "No political revolution is possible without a radical shift in one's notion of what is possible or real."
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what it gets to.
Absolutely.
Just the concept of what is possible, what is real, is already thrown into disarray just by showing up, dressed like that.
Absolutely, and that's power.
Yeah. I was hoping you could talk, interestingly enough, so a little bit of the background, I guess. Drag started as what was called female impersonation. And a lot of times it was men who just dressed up as women to perform, and then off stage would once again go back to their roles. And I thought Julian Eling was a very interesting figure.
Sure.
He was one of the first famous impersonators and famous performers. But I thought it was interesting, too, that on stage he would take up the alter egos, but then off stage he actually attempted to be extra manly and extra masculine to compensate for that.
Yes.
So there really was this divide, I mean, and now it's so strongly associated with the LGBTQ community, et cetera. But in his case, he wanted to make that divide, and I just thought that was interesting.
Well, yeah, I think part of the reason was at the time, the other part, well, there's twofold. So he didn't want to be considered what was then known as deviant. Or perverse, which was how you would be seen if you were a queer person. And the other part is that the way he was seen, he would be seen as more of an artist if he was transforming himself from this butch, kind of figure into an elegant lady of the stage,
Right.
And he had really wonderful publicists who were like, he has been stabbed by a marlin and he'll engage with in a boxing match with anyone, you know. So that was his life off stage. And
Stabbed by a marlin. That's an interesting PR person. That's what they came up with. Right.
But in his time was essentially the RuPaul of his day.
Right.
You know, had his own magazine, had his own cold cream, had his own line of cigars, had a theater named after him that still exists. And it's rumored that in this theater, which is now adjoined to the AMC on 42nd Street, there is a mural of 3 muses, but they are allegedly all Elton and drag.
Ah, look at that. Nice. I thought it was interesting too that you said you brought up this or you were talking about this divide. That it's interesting that the attitudes towards drag and towards female impersonation changed also with like economic situation as well.
Absolutely.
I thought it was interesting. You were saying like in the book in the late 1800s, you had different depressions hitting different and so people felt more insecure about their jobs. There were more immigrants coming in. They felt more insecure about their jobs, and so they grasped more tightly to this masculine ideal, and they rejected things that cast that into doubt. So I was hoping you could talk about that a little bit. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, well, the people that we're talking about specifically in that context are men, right? Because men were the people who were making the money. Men were the people who were getting jobs. And so for a very long time, male impersonation was a beloved form of theater on what was known as then the American Variety Stage, which is a precursor to vaudeville, precursor to Broadway. And these very famous male impersonators would impersonate men on stage. And then an event known as the Long Depression hit, which was it was a depression, same as the Great Depression, but at a different time, and very much impacted working class men, middle class men, who would be the people who were going to these variety shows. And so their tastes changed, and they didn't want to see a man being impersonated. They wanted to see a boy. So the male impersonators who had been so successful were only able to hold on to that success if they transitioned their performance style from impersonating a man to impersonating a boy. And a lot of people couldn't make the leap.
Interesting.
We'll be surprised how many changes in the reception of drag happen when men in power feel threatened.
Yeah. Shock. Seems like that's what creates everything that's wrong. I wanted to talk about this as well. I thought it was interesting because this tends to be a very common, repetition in this discussion is mental illness. In the book, you talked about, I guess, how, obviously in the past, like the actual manual listed homosexuality as an actual mental illness. It's right there with like schizophrenia. It wasn't taken out until like the 1970s.
That's correct.
And today, a lot of the discussion around drag and around transgender focuses on mental illness. Yeah. A lot of times, it's basically saying, well, these people are mentally ill. And I was hoping you could talk about that because that is something you hear a lot today.
That's not true at all.
Of course. Yeah, no, of course. I know.
And I laugh, but I laugh because if I don't, I'll yell. I don't want to do that in front of all of you. Are you asking why that still happens?
Yeah. Why do you think that is something that you just can't be shaken?
In my generous moments, I say it's because of lack of information, and in my distinctly more practical, less optimistic moments, I say it's willful ignorance. It's just. And especially in an election year, there are so many politicians who are just leaning into some way to say, well, I actually did something with my time in office. Look, like whatever. And it's based on fear mongering. It's based on a total lack of fact. It's historically inaccurate, and I think something that I wish a lot of these people recognized was that, if you loved Mrs. Doubtfire or if you loved Dustin Hoffman in Tootsie, it's the same thing. But your problem is with the fact that that if there's a person who's doing it who's queer, that's the problem. And that's a problem that's with the person in question, not with the person who's performing.
Right.
TLDR, that's messed up. You know, like I don't. Yeah.
TLDR. I know what that means. I'm cool. Yeah, no, I think that you're right, and I think it's interesting you bring that up, the election thing, because even like there's a man named Timothy Snyder who's written a lot about authoritarianism and everything, and he's studied Russia in depth, and he says one of the reasons why they're so hyper focused on their homophobia and everything is because of what we were just saying, that you're turning assumptions on their head, and just by doing that, you're showing people that something else is possible. Yeah. You're automatically kind of subconsciously shaking up hope and creating some kind of possibilities that don't exist. And I think that might be one of the reasons why it keeps getting coming back to.
Yeah, and people don't like to have their realities questioned.
Yeah.
And to have that in a form that creates joy, I think, is also very, can be very challenging for people who are close-minded in that way.
Yeah.
And this is something that is born from joy. And I think there was a very nice review of my book where someone said that any politician who is considering legislation against drag should read it, and which was a very nice thing to have said. But the thing I think about often in that context is that, so my book right now is 364 pages with about 100 pages of back matter. My original draft was 500 pages.
Oh, man.
And that's one city. And there are books of similar length that could be written about any city with a vibrant drag population. Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, Houston, Miami. And an art form that has a history that runs that deep and that can occupy texts of that length for any city around the country is not something that can be ignored or repressed or suppressed. And something I often say, and that I say in the book as well, is that having access to your history should be a right and not a privilege. And one of the reasons I say that is because my hope is that it allows people who feel connected to this art form, whether they're interested in performing or they are passionate about it like I am, that they know that there's a history that comes before them and that they can't just be brushed under the rug. What I feel optimistic about is that what's interesting is that at this point in history, drag now has the most allies that it's ever had. Because historically, drag was also looked down on in the queer community for a very long time. And now it's supported by the queer community. It's supported by a lot of straight allies. And these are people who are working together and making their voices heard to say, no, this is incorrect. And to suppress an art form like this is a violation of the freedom of expression that we are entitled to as citizens of this country. So I am, as much as the backlash continues, I am confident that it will not last forever.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it's really, I think it's right. We were talking about how it really does show you what's possible and all. And there's a great quote I thought it was so funny, and it's so like the flawless Sabrina.
Yeah.
She said, "Normal is just a setting on the dryer."
Yes.
And I'm like, that's great. Like, what is normal anyway? What the
Yes.
hell? Like, it's so stupid that we're all like arguing over this. And what is a man? What is a woman? What is? Who cares? Like, just be happy and just let people do what they want. As long as they're not hurting anybody.
Also, those politicians don't think being in a suit is being in drag. They've got some thinking to do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, I think that's a good way to segue into our next little. I guess feature here. This is the tough part of the show. This is called rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Rapid fire questions. There we go.
Oh my God.
Our faces are on fire.
I'm dying. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So this is the hard-hitting questions at the end of the interview. That concept was invented here. Okay. Here we go. What is the craziest thing you've ever seen in New York?
Oh, like gross or fun?
Dealer's choice.
Ooh. Well, I'll say a fun one because it was crossing the street to come here today. I saw a woman in a wedding dress crossing the Bowery. Yeah.
That's
and I
nice.
was just like, New York is alive. That makes me really happy.
Was that the gross one?
No.
Marriage. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So here, since you wrote a book on drag, you have to have this ready to go. If you were to do drag, what would be your drag name?
The drag name would be Turns a Phrase.
Turns a Phrase.
And then phrase would be spelled F-R-A-I-S-E, like French for strawberry.
A pretentious drag, huh? Okay.
I'll go on stage with a copy of The New Yorker.
Yeah, exactly. Well done.
Thanks.
Okay. All right, so we'll keep moving. If you had to live somewhere else other than New York, where would it be?
Baltimore.
Okay. Follow-up question, why?
So, given city infrastructure and crime aside, Baltimore is one of the few places I've ever been to where I felt like I could be the weirdest version of myself, and that always made me really happy. I mean, any place where John Waters has a bookstore that receives his fan mail is going to be a place that I want to hang out. So, and any time that I've been, I've just, I've at the very least found these pockets of it that speak to the innards of my soul.
That's nice.
Thank you.
Well, I guess, too, there, the weirder you are, the less likely someone's to you, I guess, too. Just turn it up as much as you can. All right. Okay. All right. So I thought it interesting, too, with the book, a big part of the performance and drag performance is lip syncing.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. If you were to lip sync a song as Turns a Phrase, what song would it be?
Kill the Lights by Alex Newell.
Give us a little sample.
I was not.
I'm just
told
kidding.
To
You don't have to do
prepare
that. But I'll tell you what mine is.
What is it?
I would do. I don't know if I'm off with what's supposed to. Take Me Home, Country Roads.
What would your drag name be?
Tammy D. That's pretty good. Tammy D, like Tommy D. All right. Tammy D. Ladies and gentlemen, Tammy D singing "Take Me Home, Country Roads." That'll close your bar down real quick. All right. Okay, what place in New York represents the city the most to you?
I have two.
Okay.
One is B&H Dairy on 2nd Avenue, and the other one is Bloomingdale's.
Bloomingdale's. Yeah. Interesting. B&H Dairy and Bloomingdale's.
Yeah.
That's your Saturday, typical Saturday, huh?
Yeah.
B&H Dairy is a vegetarian spot over on 2nd Ave. You guys ever been in the East Village?
It's like a long-standing
luncheonette
Jewish
type thing,
Jewish like lunch counter.
Yeah.
It's been there since the 30s, I think. And it's always just like slam crowded with people, and they throw the food at you, and it's just
No plates. They just throw it at you.
right in your face.
That's not true.
The lady yelled at me once because I asked for milk with my coffee. And she was like, "What? It's going to make it cold." And it was wonderful.
She's got a point. She's got a point. Okay, that's cool. And Bloomingdale's, why Bloomingdale's?
Bloomingdale's.
Best leopard print stock in the city.
So my parents were native New Yorkers.
Okay.
And then they moved down to South Florida in what I like to call the other Great Migration.
Sure.
Of Jews. All right.
Hello.
And my mother loved Bloomingdale's, and she grew up bringing me. She would bring me there, and we wouldn't even always buy anything. It was just like something that we did as mother and daughter.
Oh.
And she hated South Florida, and she loved New York, and like she still called herself a New Yorker, even though she lived in South Florida for like 40 some odd years. And that was our place, so that's why.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. Bloomingdale's, huh?
I love that I keep giving these answers that you're like, the is that?
No,
and then I'm like, this thing, and you're like, oh man.
No, it's cool.
Art.
It is. It's they're unique answers. I like that. It's good. You didn't say like Central Park or something, or Port Authority, what everyone says.
The Javits Center.
The Javits Center. The way the light hits the glass. It's a gorgeous sunset off the Javits Center. Okay. All right. So since this is a freaking trend everywhere on YouTube, on the internet, will you please tell me why you think New York City is not dead? Everyone's talking about New York City being dead. It's dead. It's whatever. I'm tired of hearing that crap.
Yeah.
Tell me why you think New York City's not dead.
Because I saw a bride in a wedding dress crossing the Bowery today. Because for every Target that opens on 14th Street or Delancey Street, there's an elderly artist living in a loft because of loft law that they've occupied for 50 some odd years. Because you can still get an egg cream.
Yeah.
Because Katz's makes the sandwiches the same way since they've made them since they've opened.
Gotta wait half a day to get in. But.
Because Casa Adela is still open. Yeah. Because people still come here to find a place and a home for themselves when they can't do that elsewhere. So for every finance bro, there's a queer Midwestern college student who came here to live a life that they never could elsewhere.
Yeah. It says a lot. I mean, it does say a lot about the city. It says a lot about the city that people are willing to put up with what they do to live here. People must be either really in love with the city, really desperate to live here, really ambitious. Like the level of those feelings that they have must be very intense. I think I always tell people that if New York was 75 degrees, affordable, and sunny every single day, this place would be a hellhole. It would be a retirement community theme park, more than it is today. So we need it to stay shitty. Yeah. Keep New York shitty. Keep Austin weird. Keep New York shitty. All right. Keep moving here. All right. Since you're an author, what is the most influential book you've ever read?
I think there have been a lot of books that have been influential in different ways. Can you be more specific?
Okay. Well, if you were to recommend one book to somebody that you wanted to just blow their mind, what would it be?
About New York history?
Anything. The dictionary.
No. Well, I think an interesting book for this crowd would be the book Love Goes to Buildings on Fire, which is 5 years in New York that changed music history forever by the author Will Hermes. And this was a book that influenced my book a lot because I love the specificity with which Will chronicles the birth of punk, of hip-hop, of the neo-jazz movement, of salsa. And I remember staying up until 4 o'clock in the morning reading it because it was just so immersive and accessible and interesting. And I would pick up facts that I still know. I read this book for the first time 10 years ago. That's what good writing is, and that's what good writing about history does. So also in that vein, I would say St. Mark's is Dead by Ada Calhoun, if you haven't read it.
Yeah.
And that was a book where I was like, I do not give a shit about revolutionary anything, and I could not put this book down. When she talks about, the revolution, like the 18th century in New York City, and I just devoured it, and I was like, this is what it should be. This is what it always should be, so that I do give a shit, Mm-hmm. And then another book that changed my life was Please Kill Me, The Uncensored Oral History of Punk. And that was a book that I read when I was like a suburban teenager in South Florida, just like clawing, champing at the bit to get out.
Yeah.
And I was just like, that's where the weirdos are. And that's where I can go be myself. And that was the book that taught me that. And then I met Legs McNeil in person at an event. Like, has anyone been to the Hell Happening Gallery? Like the events that they have there? They had a history event that was related to Please Kill Me, and I met him. And I said, you know, your book was a Bible to me. And in my book, he wrote, if this is your Bible, I must be God.
Nice. Nice. A messianic complex. Sick. All right. Well, those are good answers. I always think this is an interesting question. A couple more questions. One more quick question. What's your earliest childhood memory?
I think it was, do you remember the little cars that you could sort of foot around the house in?
Yeah.
I remember doing that very early, probably one morning, and my dad came in and just looked at me. And then I didn't do it ever again.
He didn't even say anything?
No.
Wow.
He was wearing like these blue pajama pants, and I just went, and I knew.
This interview just turned into a therapy session, I think. How did that make you feel? Wow, that's interesting. It is funny how you just kind of saddle with those memories and you just can't control them. That's your earliest memory. Okay, one more question. This is the most important question. I ask all my guests, very, very important. Will you be my friend?
Yes, I will, Tom.
That was the fastest answer. The fastest answer we've gotten to date. I like that you trust me like that. That's good. Well, Elyssa, thank you so much for coming and being a guest. I really appreciate it. Guys, she'll be selling her book after the show over there, so you can buy her book. It's great. It really is great. I flew through it. It's really, really worth it. But thank you so much.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you for having me. What a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Give it up for Elyssa Maxx Goodman, huh?